It's time for us to look at the new partnership that the AU has made with Nigeria, as the African Union. AU has officially endorsed Nigeria as the digital trade champion for the continent under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, the AfCFTA Digital Trade Protocol. So this recognition follows the federal government of Nigeria's commendable efforts in promoting digital enterprise and innovation. To handle this discussion this morning, our guest, Chukwuma Okenwa, who is Executive Director, Lead Network Africa, joins virtually. Thank you for joining and good morning.
Yeah, good morning and thank you for having me on your show.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm not alone in the studio. You just heard someone say you're welcome. That means that I have two gentlemen who are my partners on the show. Together, we'll be having this discussion. Now, the partnership that Nigeria has come into with the AU, where Nigeria has been endorsed as the digital trade champion for the AfCFTA, it sounds like a very big feat for Nigeria. If you look at what Africa is doing in the digital sector, and Nigeria picked as the digital champion for the AfCFTA, this is a big one. Do you think so?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I consider that as deserving because before now we know that Nigeria has demonstrated capacity, particularly as it has to do with fintech, even far ahead of the West. Yeah, because we know that ordinarily, like to move money from the US to even like somewhere around UK, then it used to take up to like 5 days. Nigeria was able to like achieve that in 48 to 72 hours, right? That was quite disruptive, and that is why when packages like PayPal and its related replication that we saw in Nigeria came on board. It became something up for negotiation and investment. So Nigeria has actually disrupted itself. And then ahead of time, like we saw in the news, Nigeria taking the lead to like organize an economic roundtable, to discuss about digital trade and its implications for Africa, further lends the capacity of the nation to, serve as a radar to other African countries. And that is exactly what the African Union has recognized. And we want Nigeria to drive that change by, recognizing the country as the digital trade champion. So it's like an invitation to do more, actually.
Was Nigeria expected to play as the digital champion for the AfCFTA digital trade protocol?
So basically, the role of a champion will always be like to set the pace, right? To drive the change, to be able to like, since Africa Union actually saw the need to first of all like set up a protocol, come up with a document on 8 major areas that this trade protocol should be able to address. And of course, you have things like rules of origin. Then you talk about things like cross-border data transfers, right? So basically, what this digital data protocol is meant to do, it's to actually address some of the what I may call like bureaucratic bottlenecks that has limited the ability of African countries to trade amongst themselves, right? When you don't have enough data, you have emerging security issues and no data to really like contain it, whether it's insecurity arising from corruption, from terrorism, from some forms of thefts. If you don't have data to like contain all of this, you cannot even be able to like build the needed advocacy. And then part of the thing also that the champion is meant to like show leadership in, it's financial technology. That's the fintech, which, like I said, that when it comes to mobile technology and fintech, Nigeria has actually distinguished itself, and it's a kind of a recognition to do more actually, to continue in that might and you know show other African countries how to do it better.
Yeah, thank you. How big is this really? Also putting into cognizance that AfCFTA has really not performed so well since inception, as most African countries hardly trade with themselves. What benefit will this really mean for Nigeria?
Well, I think basically what I see this happening, it's further strengthening the conversation on AfCFTA. We know that AfCFTA has more or less like been like a very good policy on paper, but with actually a lot of challenges, obstacles. In fact, the obstacles seems to be more. Having like looking at the situation of upscaling, failed stories, regional stories of African collaboration to the continental level. Now, what do I mean? For instance, let me even start with just not just the movement of materials now, right? Of goods, but also like of people. When within ECOWAS, for instance, countries within ECOWAS sign a pact as a community, to replicate an EU kind of stuff, where people can move and from one region to another without, from one country to another without necessarily passport control. You see that some of the challenges that we faced in that is, and maybe someone in Ghana feels a Nigerian is not good enough to come into their country, and you want to enter through the border, you see like some kind of ill treatment, right? Meanwhile, regions that we are trying to replicate, like over there in the Europe, you could move from Vienna to Germany and to Switzerland, and until somebody tell you you are now in a new country, you probably won't know, right? That is where like some of those freedom that is expected, we see that work. So when you also talk about like this free trade, we see that the challenges has been, yes, that on paper we say we want to do trade amongst ourselves, like from no trade to, I mean, to from low tariff to no tariff, to almost like other bottlenecks that even make trade impossible and makes it cheaper to trade with someone in another continent. So the only thing I see is that this is going to further strengthen the conversations and perhaps could bring Africa to the table of actually asking ourselves, do we really want to do this? And if we want to do it, why don't we take away the bottlenecks, and match actions or match words with actions?
Very much. So I want to look at the former president of Libya. He was, advocating for Africa to have one single currency. And even though most African countries saw his mode of wanting to achieve that objective as not very, very clean, or it will put them at loggerhead with our Western counterparts, didn't really accede to his proposal. But now, like you rightly mentioned, when it comes to fintech and the mode of payments, Nigeria seems to be at the forefront, and I'm quite surprised that we are, doing this in a way that even the West is applauding us. But within the continent of Africa, when we meet heads of states commune together to speak and why Africa needs to trade with themselves, one of the bottleneck and one of the constraints is the method of payment. If Nigeria is bailing the cat in the digital realm and in fintechs, mobile bankers, where they are the Abuja round table, do you see, what suggestion would you have for banks within Africa using the instrument of the central banks in all of these countries to bring this process seamlessly so that after the trade area will operate rather seamlessly when it comes to talk about trade within African countries?
Okay, so the reality and one of the things that has been like a major challenge is the very fact that African countries amongst themselves would rather prefer you pay them in dollars or euros than in your own currency. But through their central banks, they could have an arrangement where, like, nothing stop, someone that the Nigerian central bank from transacting with the Ghanaian central bank, maybe in naira and in cedis, right? It's all about arrangement. It's all about, oh, you need something from my country, and I can buy that in your naira. But you see, one of the major challenges actually is if, like, Nigeria bilaterally agree with Ghana, right, to do such things, and maybe like there is trade imbalance between Nigeria and Ghana, such that we have enough cedis to spend, but we won't be able to spend all of it in Ghana, and we are looking the way of other African countries. What is the degree of acceptability of the cedis, right? So you can actually take it to like a country where they'll be negotiating the value of it to be maybe like 3 times less than the value of what you got it. We see that actually also play out in all these bureau de change. Why we know that dollar is that whatever be the case, right? It must get its higher value in the marketplace. But if you purchase any other currency, like somebody want to travel, maybe like to China, to Japan, to the Gulf area like Qatar, if you go to like all these bureau de change, right? You are going to get it far, far cheaper, even like the Kenya shillings, far, far cheaper than the official rate, that is available at the bank. But when it comes to the dollars, if you are to get it at official rate, it will certainly be cheaper. At the marketplace, where the real deal happens, the bureau de change, you are going to get it very high. And that's why the dollar is the dollar. Now, but then the question would be, are African countries even willing, first and foremost, to come together, strengthen one another, protect its economy against heavyweights, like the EU, the dollars itself? Because you see, it's been actually a challenge for BRICS to break the power of dollars. I mean, for over 10 years, we've had that proposal that very soon the dollars will be decimated. But guess what? Even some people in BRICS will not trust Russian rubles enough, right? Or the Chinese yuan. Because of maybe like inconsistent policies. All of this could impact on outcomes on the currencies. And when it comes to the economy, you don't do sentiments, right? You won't say, oh, I want to do business and make lesser, because from my brother, when you can make it, at a higher profit from another. And that's what happened. So Africans must really come together. African countries must really come together and come up with like a way to actually deal with these things, that has impacted, that has served as a limit. And one of it has always been the inability to trade in its own currencies, because it is more profitable, more stable, to have enough dollars, right? That one currency that you can hardly devalue for whatever reason.
It's a good thing to be endorsed by the AU as a country to be the champion for this digital economy we speak about. But we also know that there's a lot of issues in terms of access in Nigeria. Do you think that we have strong regulatory framework really to drive a digital economy?
Well, at the moment, certainly not, right? And that is why, like, even one of the things the Consumer Protection Council has been advocating for is to see like a situation where the NCC, right, could come up with the Ministry of Trade, review some of the digital gaps, even in regulating the artificial intelligence, which has become very disruptive in the sense that it has its own pros and cons, right? Where we look at the role it plays in our aviation, the booking of flights, booking of hotels. We also talk about its um, capability of a kind of compromising the privacy of individuals. Because AI can actually gather algorithms, from people, and then at the end of the day, it becomes something of market value. That the things that you're searching. So I give you an instance of how, some of those things could be like a violation of someone's privacy, right? So just imagine, like, if there are sites I get to visit and wouldn't want anybody to know that I visit those sites, right? Through like those pixel tracking, I begin to see adverts on some of those things are recommendations, right? And just imagine I hand over my system to someone and the person watching videos keep getting all those recommendations, then it reviews the things I do in the private using my system, right? So there are those privacy concerns when it comes to artificial intelligence, and that's why, like, I mean, when it comes to digital governance, right? There is that which policy framework, right? And also like that coordination and even ability to harmonize all of the activities happening. It's just only in recent time that Nigeria government, thanks to the Buhari-led administration, you know, something that was meant to be to clamp down on Twitter, now brought like a very important conversation. And that is to realize that these giant digital companies has been making money off Nigeria space without actually paying tax. And today, if you want to advertise on any of those platforms, whether it be on X, whether it be on Facebook, on Instagram, you have to like give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Even let's look at the opportunities that Nigerian tech companies, fintech companies stand to benefit from this new endorsement coming from the AU regarding the AfCFTA digital trade protocol.
So the opportunities there can only be from the one actually that the government it's able to create, leveraging this announcement. And what do I mean by that? I mean those guys never needed any government recognition before now, to get into research, come up with tech solutions. If you want them to do more, then the government actually could now begin to create ecosystems, of some of these innovators and say, you know what, you guys actually, I mean, we got the announcement as Nigeria government, but this award, this recognition should go to our techies who without motivation, who without tech funds, who without any form of Silicon Valley anywhere in Nigeria, where fundings are pumped in, to encourage research. You were able to do this without government funding and support. Okay, you know what? We're launching tech funds, tech innovation funds, and we want you to do more. We now want to have like that ecosystem where, you can think. And that's exactly, why as you are celebrating innovation from the West, many more will be on the way because they value research, they fund research, right? And at every phase you've seen them disrupt the world through research. You remember like during the World War when Japan became like insurmountable and the US, funded the Manhattan Project led by Oppenheimer, to come up with a weapon of mass destruction. And that was when the first ever nuclear weapon was
Oh, seems like there's been a challenge there in connection, but we do hope that very quickly that can be overcome so we can continue our conversation with our guests. Okay, I hear that he's back now.
okay.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
is it.
So that is it.
So what I'm trying to say
what
in
I'm
essence,
Let's give it some time and hope that we can continue the conversation with him. But Doc and Pri, looking at this confidence that the AU has reposed in Nigeria's digital system and what has been happening in Nigeria in the digital space, they could have made any other African country the champion, but it seemed like all of the innovations, all of the creativity and resilience of the Nigerian digital economy is beginning to pay off. This is a recognition from the EU?
Well, I think as a country, nature placed us on a very good pedestal.
Okay, it seems our guest is back. Can we get back with him? Please, could you continue your line of thoughts? Okay, so please go on, Doc.
Yeah, so The undersea cable connects Africa in 4 different places, and one is Nigeria here. You have Mombasa in Kenya. You have Alexandria in Egypt, and in South Africa. Now, that creates already a very huge hub of market for us as a country. It places you on a pedestal of advantage. Because for almost all the things that gets through data that move around in West Africa, for example, the gateway is here in Nigeria. And that's why a lot of people have said that the government of Nigeria has not prioritized digital economy so well, because it could actually pay Nigeria more than what crude oil is fetching if there's a whole lot of strategy to play in that particular environment. And it's also good that the bill for the digital economy is before the National Assembly to be able to set a framework to regulate the entire space so that, of course, those who are playing are protected by the law. There's so much we can harvest. And we can have a population of young people who are very active, and we are not investing energy to govern that space. Just recently, UAE made a law to transition into a proper knowledge economy driven by artificial intelligence. And for more than 5 or 6 years now, UAE has a ministry for artificial intelligence. And the country is studying what is happening in that area and giving every attention to it. And I think we need to do more in terms of investment in that area. Look at assets, for example. You still find that less than 50% of people in Nigeria, of 200 million people, really have access to this digital economy. Little Rwanda has been able to do more in terms of connecting its localities to a common 4G network. We are still struggling with that because the penetration of internet is still weak here. And I think government need to invest in it. I remember speaking with somebody in Rwanda, and he said, when, of course, Paul Kagame took that decision about 20 years ago, people were asking, I said, is this guy crazy? That is borrowing money to lay 4G cable around, not even his own personal money. But he said after 5 years, you can go back to the same borrower and said, well, we are making more money now than you can ever imagine. And so it's paying off for them. You can imagine what we can take as a nation if we make effort to actually make internet accessible, and what resource that we can actually galvanize from that environment.
Now, the Nigeria actually convened the Digital Economy Roundtable in January, and when the former president of Niger Republic was speaking, he lauded the initiative of President Bola Tinubu in that regard. And then that roundtable actually created the chance for young pioneers in fintech, mobile banking, and other areas of the digital economy to convene. And so it's a good platform for them. But beyond that, the issue of funding remains critical to the digital sector. For some of these apps to be developed, tested, and actually have them providing solutions for trade and other areas where they're needed, some funding is needed. Now, what collaboration do you think needs to happen for African fintech companies, African tech companies to begin to take advantage of the opportunities that are opening up beyond the shores of Nigeria for them to showcase their expertise?
Okay. Okay, so for me, I think Nigeria, if the African Continental Free Trade Area and the African Union is telling Nigeria that we are championing and bailing the cat in this aspect, I am glad, but I think there's more we can do. However, I want to point out this brief data. Now, Africans trading among themselves has generated $192 billion. For the European nations who are trading among themselves, they can generate over 3 trillion euros. Their trade volume is quite large. The Asians trading among themselves is equally running to trillions of dollars. Now, for Nigeria, we have the advantage because we are bailing the cat in the tech space and in the digital sector. So if we can utilize this and not waiting for all other African countries to catch up with us, we can use this and take our place in the African Continental Free Trade Area to move in our goods and also to provide the payment systems easy for other African countries to participate. Then we will not only be there, but equally show others the way.
Okay, it seems that our guest is back. Let's see if we can reconnect with him and continue the conversation with him. Hello, are you there?
Yeah, sure.
Please, you were on a line of thought talking about how Nigerian tech companies, fintech providers can benefit from the endorsement of the AU, endorsing Nigeria as the digital champion for the AfCFTA.
Okay, sure. I was basically saying that we expect the Nigeria government to take that lead. Yes, like I did mention, even before this recognition, we've seen all these techies on their own independently, right? In their clusters, they were able to develop these tech solutions. So since this has been able to end the country and the government, a kind of an enviable title and an enviable status within the African Union, then Nigeria can further sustain and demonstrate its position as the champion by now creating platforms, to advance further research. By that, I mean, we want to see more tech hubs, funding, very, very important. Like when you talk about Silicon Valley, and then before the disruption from the internet, I was speaking about, how great nations fund research and has used that, as a disruptive tool when it is needed the most. I did mention that during the Second World War, when Japan became almost insurmountable, right? Other allied nations that were working in tandem with them, Germany and Italy has given up and they refused to. And there's no other thing the US could do than to sponsor the Manhattan Project to develop the nuclear weapon that was used in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, to bring Japan on its knees. So to actually create that needed disruption, to be led by the Nigerian people and government, then the government must be able to fund further research in this area, right? I tell you the honest truth. When, as a nation, we value the thinking process, we value think tanks, fund it. What great nation actually practically do is pay people to think for them. Pay people to think and come up with those ideas they have, like those wild thoughts of imaginations. Pay them to sit down, develop it further, explore it further, explore those possibilities. And at the end of the day, even if it takes 25 years, they're able to compensate for that level of investment. But here we're all in a haste. And certainly if somebody is this type that want to think and come up with solutions, typical Nigeria culture of hustle, hustle intelligence, would want to see that as this person is lazy, right? How can somebody just say he's a researcher? How can somebody say he's a thinker? How can somebody say that he's just there maybe as a philosopher, just to develop ideas, that can either socially engineer the society or a kind of to develop a data template, that can impact on trade, right? Impact on security, impact on relationship, and impact on collaborations.
You've highlighted key points. The impact that these solutions are supposed to have, it goes beyond one aspect of life. And you also talked about paying people to think. Yes, there are co-creation hubs, tech hubs in Nigeria, but what comes out of this hub is what we should be looking at, how to develop them. And yes, you've also pointed out that the patience is needed because these are young people that you're putting together in the space. After a while, they may become impatient when what they were hoping for does not come. So there is need to perhaps create a system that sustains it so that while they are at it creating, there's something that sustains them and takes it further. If it takes quite a number of years or some time to prove what they're developing to get it to that point where money begins to come. The solution has been tried, it has been tested, and is now approved and marketed. So my question to you is, how do we create a structure that takes care of the time frame that's maybe needed for this to sustain it, so that each person did not begin to disperse, go independent, because yes, the hustle syndrome comes in, but they also need to take care of themselves. They also need to move on with life. Do we need to collaborate now with institutions for continuity?
Certainly, certainly, because you actually need institutions to drive individuals. Because when people are working independently, right, there is really no way to leverage on the power of collaboration and synergy. And what makes synergy a synergy is that, the two of us should be able to like collectively achieve outcomes that will be greater than if we decide to work independently. And that's where the idea of synergy comes in. And to create that synergy, we need institutions, platforms, right? That's going to drive these, get people together, give them timelines and targets, right? And ensure that they are just working. I mean, some of these world organizations that we know, if you literally enter some of them, you just see like a hall of think tank, like made up of those that are just thinking, right? I mean, the very first time I had the opportunity of getting into the World Economic Forum, right? Just a very massive space where you just have people just thinking, right? Carry their system, working and just thinking and developing things. Every morning they come there by 9 and they are leaving by 5, right? Just thinking. I mean, they are not coming to carry hoe and machete, right? When you are not at your workplace, they know that there is vacancy. It's not what you are going to bring in, the factor of someone that is talented. Maybe any day you want to come to work, you come. It's real business, because Nigeria is going to pay for your time, right? So there should be targets like these policy areas, that the data protocol within the AfCFTA is meant to address, whether it's in security, right? Whether it's in managing cross-border challenges. All of those areas are areas for ideation, areas, potential early areas where the Nigeria government could say, you know what, we need those that work in this area. We need the ecosystem. Just have an ed group of people that research further in those areas and come up with solutions. And at the end of the day, the nation and the entire continent is going to, benefit from such kind of programs.
Thank you very much. Now, recently, this administration established the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy. It's an invention of the current administration because of what it envisaged in terms of internal revenue generation regarding the maritime sector in Nigeria. And one of my colleagues equally referred to Rwanda that, has created the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence. So by way of policy, let's assume that with Nigeria's exploits in fintechs and in technology, and now that we have been, seen as the champion by African Union as the digital platform, the digital, front, belling the cart in that particular space. By way of policy, what advice would you advise the government so that we can make inroads and, lead Africa in that space of payment infrastructure, fintech infrastructure, to govern that space so that we become not only lead the cart, but to become the authority in that space? And what are the possible earnings that Africa and Nigeria can get from that?
Already, I really think that what we can actually do further now would be to make the issue of fintech an item on our public diplomacy strategy, foreign policy. I can tell you that Nigeria has already become a leader in that particular sector. Like I did mention earlier, that if a technologically developed country like the US, could look the way of Nigeria by way of, trying to buy over some of our tech solutions, right? Then that really tells you that we are doing well. You know, it doesn't like I always remember when I was in secondary school and a girl that was quite very exceptionally brilliant got to the point of when I became a serious student, asked me a question one day, and I told myself, I don't really need anybody to tell me that I am doing well now, and if such a person could actually, meet me to for some level of clarity. So when you have that big shots, in that space like the US, saying, "Can we look at the solution you've developed? Can we replicate the same?" Right? So I just think that the only aspect that we now need to strengthen out, right? Apart from putting it out there, this is what we are doing. This is an aspect of our forte as a country. This is where we excel in because we need to tell our own story, right? Because of course, whether you talk about in terms of whether in the pros or the cons, right? When you look at the one that has been put out oftentimes in the news, if you ask the FBI guys, right, they will tell you that the hush puppies of this world, what makes them hush puppy is not necessarily because they are into internet fraud or some forms of advanced fee fraud, right? Beyond that, they do things that make other nations like to wonder, right? I mean, when you talk about like some things like business email compromise, where somebody can use an email address customized from either the government of a nation or from a renowned company. Send you email you think is real, send you a link for payment, you are seeing the name of the company, and at the end of the day, you are paying into the wrong account. That's some form of disruption. But you also have some positive guys who say, you know what, we are not going to use this our ingenuity, this our creativity into the negatives. Let's also create like an alternative. And so anybody that have understood how creative Nigerians are when it comes to like issue of tech, we've done that in the negative, we've done that in the positive, shouldn't be surprised. The only thing that we now begin to look at is okay, like attendance security issues that goes with the digital space and being able to like create more buffers, right? To shield some of those innovations, from some forms of maybe spywares, right? Either it's from some countries, like creating more like some privacy because it's simply the simple truth. Just like when the AU building was donated, and over time it was discovered that a certain government that donated that as a gift, created like some spy devices, that was giving feedback to their home country. These are all diplomatic realities, and some of these things has to be part of the design thinking process, not as an afterthought. Security should be very part, should be at the foundation of every innovation, not as an afterthought of, oh, come on, we never thought of how to protect this innovation, from some forms of maybe like hijack, right? you know so that is the aspect I think we can begin to look at as a country.
Well, thank you so much, Chukwuma Okenwa, who's Executive Director, Lead Network Africa, for taking our time to talk extensively on the AfCFTA Digital Trade Protocol and Nigeria being endorsed by the AU as the digital champion for the AfCFTA. We do hope that African countries will see more reasons to do business together, and every areas that needs to be straightened out before this kicks off will happen, and Africa will become better for it at the end of the day.
You're welcome.